What's up, everybody? It's Izzy. In today's video, what I want to talk about is weak point training. So I think one of the biggest assumptions in powerlifting programming is that people should be doing weak point training. Anecdotally, many powerlifting programs advocate doing weak point training, trying to address quote-unquote weak muscle groups. But in my experience, this is a claim that really needs to be evaluated more closely. So first of all, I think there's two things that we need to separate that people often conflate and combine as the same thing. And that is one, that you can quote unquote fix a weak point, and two, that doing weak point training will lead to faster progress. Those are two separate claims. I would say that the first one is probably not true in the vast majority of cases, whereas the second one might be. So as far as I can tell, there's no good literature on this subject. There's no good literature showing that by doing weak point training, you can change a lifter's strength curve. And since we are just treating anecdotes and not literature here, some powerlifters say that it does work. In my experience coaching over 100 lifters in the past 5 years, competitive powerlifters, I have personally never once seen someone change their sticking point without changing their technique. So you can change your sticking point if you go from sumo to conventional, if you go from flat back to round back deadlifting, if you narrow or widen your grip on bench press, if you go from arching a lot to not arching, if you go from low bar to high bar, if you change your squat stance width. Sometimes you can see it change if you move up enough weight classes. But for the most part, the reason why you have a sticking point in the range of motion is usually not due to a weak muscle group. What it is almost always due to is just a combination of your particular technique and your individual leverages, the segment lengths on your body, how long your forearm is, how long your upper arm is, how long your torso is, how long your femurs are, how long your tibia is. These are the things that primarily determine your sticking point more so than having a weak muscle group. So, for example, most people, if they try to do a wide grip bench, will find that they are the weakest off of the chest. If they do a close grip bench, most people are going to miss a close grip bench much higher up in the movement. Now, if you have a wide grip on bench and you're missing off the chest, is that because you have weak pecs, or is that simply because a wide grip bench press is biomechanically disadvantaged at the bottom of the range of motion? If you are struggling to lock out close grip bench presses at the very top, is that because you have weak triceps, or is that because due to the long range of motion and the mechanics of a close grip bench press, you are biomechanically disadvantaged at a higher point in the range of motion than you are with a wide grip bench press? And I think most people will have no trouble admitting that that weak points are actually, in the case of wide grip bench versus close grip bench, are usually due just to the way that somebody's built and the particular technique of the movement. I mean, almost everybody's going to miss off of the chest with a wide grip bench, and almost everyone is going to miss higher up with a close grip bench. So whatever your competition technique is, it's probably the weak point that you have is probably due to your technique and your individual levers much more than a particular muscle group. And this is the key point that I really want to get across. And it's why, in my opinion, you cannot fix or really change sticking points without changing technique, because a sticking point is not really caused by a quote-unquote weak muscle group. It is caused primarily by the fact that your technique and your anthropometry is creating a biomechanically disadvantaged piece of range of motion, right? There's a part of the range of motion that is simply biomechanically disadvantaged compared to the rest. And there's just very little you can do to change this, besides changing your technique, which I already covered. Now let's evaluate the second claim, which is perhaps more important, and that is that doing weak point training can enhance your rate of progress. I think this one is more up for debate than the other point that I was talking about, which was fixing a weak point or changing a sticking point. That's something that I do not think really happens. Now, let's evaluate again, like whether doing weak point training might make you stronger faster. And I think the best that we can say is that it might. That's all we can really go on. There's people, for example, that make faster progress with a daily undulating periodization program that pretty much has no variety. There's other people that have seemed to make better progress with a more conjugate style training, or just a training style like, say, Mike Teixeira's reactive training systems that uses, it's not conjugate, but it uses a much higher amount of exercises than your standard DUP program. So it's the case, in my opinion, that, you know, doing something like pin presses at the chest, which forces you to generate force in quote unquote, you know, your weakest part of the range of motion, due to variety, due to perhaps making you a little bit stronger in that biomechanically disadvantaged position, it could be the case that you make progress faster doing this. But I think the key distinction that we have to make here is that this might be the case. It just might be the case. It's possible that the only reason why lifters benefit from doing weak point training is due to a novelty effect of adding a new exercise that is still very similar to the competition lift and thus has a high degree of specificity. That could be the case as well. So again, I think the jury is kind of out on weak point training. And the reason why I want to say this is because a lot of people just assume that weak point training is something that you should be doing. But in my opinion, the benefits of weak point training are primarily hypothetical. Sure, there's a lot of anecdote of powerlifters saying that it works, but the reason why these anecdotes are hard to take at face value is because anytime that you're changing an aspect of your programming, there's so many other variables that you have to analyze. Did you change the overall volume? Did you change the frequency? Did you change the intensity? And in my opinion, these factors are usually more important than the fact that you added some new magic exercise. Anyways, that's all I really want to say on this subject, guys. I especially wanted to make this for my athletes because I get asked a lot about, you know, why I don't include more variations and why there's not weak point training and why we can't do something to address the sticking point or whatever. And it's because, in my experience, your sticking point is caused by biomechanics and technique, not by a weak muscle. And all of the isolation work for a specific muscle that you want to do will not change that sticking point. And again, I'm not saying that I include zero weak point training, but the second argument that weak point training helps you make progress faster is, in my estimation, and I don't really even know if this is debatable, just hypothetical. There is not hard evidence showing that people make faster progress when they include weak point training versus simply adjusting the volume, intensity, and frequency of their competition lifts. As always, my friends, have a nice day and good luck with your training. Peace.